UConn's dominance. Is it good for college basketball? You're Locked On UConn.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A little housekeeping. My YouTube support has been amazing. I'd love to have all my subscribers download the audio version wherever you get your podcast. Equally as important to help the channel grow and Locked On audience grow as a whole. So if you can do me two quick favors. First, click that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen. Then head over to Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Hit that follow button. This way, you'll never miss a moment of Locked On UConn. Can't tell you how much that support means to me. And if you're tuning into your car, give us a 5-star review, trigger some good referrals for similar shows, or we can get some new audience members who are interested in more UConn content. On today's episode, we'll bring in Brandon Carney. Brandon is a sports content creator. You've probably seen his videos. Has something like 834,000 TikTok followers, 456,000 YouTube subscribers. I think he's got 330 million views as of right now, last checked on YouTube. His video of him portraying Dan Hurley talking to the LA Lakers in negotiation caught my eye. I was already subscribing for some fantasy football stuff, and I knew Brandon was a UConn alum, but I really want to bring him in and ask him a bunch of questions, talk about his comedy and his sketch. Let's bring in Brandon. Let's get him on. Brandon, how are you today, man? How's everything?
I'm good, man. How's it going?
It's great. I asked this cold open question, and since you're a UConn alum, you're familiar with the program, you tweet about them all the time. Is UConn's dominance good for college basketball?
You know, I remember this question, obviously, for the women's team for so long, and they've kind of taken a little more of a backseat. They're still one of the top programs, but I remember my answer now is the same as it was then, and it's, yeah, I mean, you have a dominant program like this, it forces everybody else to raise their game, and the fact is, especially for the men's program right now, like, they haven't been dominant for that long. We're going on, what, a year and a half of this, maybe? Like, people forget that for most of the prior season, like, you know, they had a terrible month of January, and they really only became a dominant force like once the NCAA tournament started. So you had basically that NCAA tournament and then obviously all of last season. And, you know, a year and a half of dominance, I don't think it's a bad thing.
That's a great point. I think we get caught up in the fact that UConn was ranked number 1 and 2 before that January swoon, if you will, where they lost 6 of 8, in 23. I joked around. I said, I have a 15-month-old son. He's seen 2 UConn national championships, and he's not even 2 years old. So he's a legend, as some of the other ones that we're going to be talking about today. Let's jump into why I asked you to jump on. Like, I think, we'll talk about UConn and some of the stuff that's going on with them currently, but your sketch comedy is fantastic. And I'm not just saying that because you're on. Like, if you never had responded, I'd still be watching your videos and kind of checking you out. Will we see more UConn sketch comedy if they continue to dominate the college basketball landscape?
I think so. I've always kind of, obviously football is my primary sport as far as the sketch comedy stuff goes. And but I do make a point to touch on sort of the biggest things going on in the sports world, whatever sport that may be. I mean, I made a Caitlin Clark video a week ago. It's just kind of covering all my bases. And so, UConn, although up to this point it had just been something that I personally love just as a basketball fan and as an alum, the more they kind of occupy the national spotlight and the national conversation, absolutely. Like, there's so much stuff to talk about there and to make fun of, and especially make fun of people that are going to inevitably get annoyed by UConn being on top and being so good and Dan Hurley staying in the college game. So I could definitely see that happening. Doing a skit on Hurley possibly going to the Lakers was kind of a obvious, easy topic for me to touch on. But there could definitely be some other stuff that comes down the pipe over time.
My favorite comment I don't know if it was in TikTok or YouTube, was it was from, I think, a Lakers fan. He was like, my guy made fun of LeBron, Bronny, and the Lakers in less than a 60-second clip. It just, I don't know why that resonated with me. It just made me laugh really hard. I've definitely shared that with all my friends. And it's been great. in your profile picture, you have a YouTube channel is number 32 Connecticut jersey. So whether it's Rip Hamilton, Donovan Clingan, who wore that proudly, so there's no share, hiding the fact they're a UConn alum. Do you try to stay away? I mean, you mentioned that it's topical, but do you try to stay away from UConn topics unless it's something huge like Dan Hurley? Because I kind of look at it like we all make fun of Donnie Marshall for being like almost like a down the road or almost anti UConn on a broadcast because he went to UConn, so he's trying not to kind of go over the top. Do you find yourself where you have to do that a little bit, or do you not care?
It's an interesting question because, like, again, college basketball and my fandom there doesn't really come up all that often because most of my content is football centric. But I think I definitely do try to avoid flexing too much because I think, you have a fan base that, like, they could very easily get annoyed by that. And also all my other teams that I'm a fan of, like, historically pretty successful, grew up a Patriots fan. It's like, I'm not trying to just, remind all my majority, like, football-focused fans, like, hey, by the way, my college basketball team is way better than yours. Like, I like to throw it in here and there, but, I wouldn't say I hide it. Obviously, it being my profile picture on every social media platform I have, it's just kind of a little reminder there. But, yeah, I think I kind of avoid it just from a content perspective, at least from going overboard with it. But that might just be because of the sport that it is.
No, it's totally fair. I don't know if you know this today, but Malik Thomas, who's a 5-star guard, number 7 in the class overall, from all of college basketball players, is visiting stores today. Do you think some of your content, in particular the Dan Hurley content, is an influence on? Listen, this is a TikTok, this is a social media world. All these kids have lots of socials. And he admitted that Dan Hurley turning on the Lakers, it was like, wow, like they mean business. Like UConn's going to be legit. Do you think you have even like a moniker of influence on sometimes when people like see that stuff and go, yeah, I mean, he's right, and look to kind of come to UConn?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't have a level of ego that makes me think I'm any part of these kids' recruiting choices. I mean, I definitely think there's a chance that they see it for sure. I mean, I know, NFL players see my stuff all the time, all my football-focused videos, so I think it's certainly within the realm of possibility that, like, UConn potential recruits or current players or whatever may have seen my stuff and just obviously can't, comment or post it because it's a little too aggressive for them to actually associate themselves with. But I mean, look, I wouldn't be surprised if they saw it. I don't think it probably influences their decision at all. But if it does, great. I will happily wear that with pride.
Yeah, we'll just pretend like it does. I mean, you almost have 1 million followers on TikTok. I would imagine anybody that's in high school, college, that's making a decision probably follows you or is adjacent to it, or it's on their feed. All right, well, listen, we're going to talk about Brandon's time at UConn coming up after this. Oops. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for any winning championship, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP. Bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guarantee Fit only available to U.S. customers. Let's see if I get this right. Yes, let's bring Brandon back to Locked On UConn. I always make that mistake. When I intro people, there's like all these different buttons to bring people in, and there's always like a gap. So I apologize if you're watching.
Very familiar with StreamYard.
so apologize there. You're a UConn alum. What's your fondest time at UConn, both just being on campus and then maybe from a basketball perspective, either men's or women's? Like, what are your best memories there?
Yeah. So I mean, first and foremost, like, loved every minute that I was on that campus. People say college, best 4 years of your life. Like, I've done pretty well for myself since then, but like I still look back at that time so fondly. Made the right decision, all that. Basketball wise, I was there for a pretty rough period. I was at UConn from 2014 to 2018. So we came
Okay.
right off that national title. That was the summer before I enrolled. And so from the time that I was there, the 4 years I was there, they made the tourney one time, the men's team that is, made the tourney one time and won one game within that tourney. So, I was coming out of high school thinking like, oh, I'm going to get to go to this awesome basketball school and see all this great basketball. And then, we're losing to Wagner and Northeastern in back-to-back games. And I'm just like, I have no idea what's going on. It was still a great time to be that close to the team and close to all the teams. And I think my best memory overall, probably the women's Final Four in 2018 that I was able to go to just as part of UCTV, the campus TV station. I was able to go there, cover that as a media member, and that was an incredible Final Four. The UConn women did not win, but it was the final where Arike Ogunbowale hit that buzzer beater for Notre Dame. So, like, insane ending. All the games that we saw there were awesome, and that was, like, one of the moments that really, like, made me feel like I was or like could make it in kind of the sports media space, just feeling like a big deal, being surrounded by all those people. A very, very cool experience.
That's awesome. Let's bring it to present day with both the men's and women's teams. The men are on the precipice of potentially doing something historic that hasn't been done in 50 years. And the women have a top recruiting class and just seem to kind of reload. I mean, even this year was a down year. Dan Hurley said it at a dinner. He said, it's a down year for Gino is the Final Four, and that's what they did last year, right? So I'm curious your thoughts. First, the men. What are your thoughts of the guys that came back, and like initial thoughts of Alex Caravan coming back, chances of a three-peat? Just give me your take on that.
I think it's going to be super interesting because it's going to be super different from last year. I think the kind of hallmark of UConn last year was even when the offense wasn't working, which, I mean, every team has stretches where the offense goes a little cold. The defense was always such a anchor to rely on between Klingon just being the most impactful defensive player probably in the entire sport, and then Stephon Castle, who's going to be drafted likely top 5 because of his defensive skill set and just being able to lock down anybody you throw him on. I think we're going to head back toward, even though UConn's going to be one of the best teams in college basketball, it's not going to be the dominance we saw last year. And I think there's going to be a level of like maybe shock among either fans or just casual viewers of like, oh, this team's they've fallen off or something like that. And it's like, no, we just had a very unique combination of defensive freaks last year that we don't have anymore. With that said, there's still plenty of talent to be able to be the best team in college basketball, to be able to three-peat, in my opinion. Getting Caravan back just as kind of an anchor, a leader, I think was huge. The roster was going to be good with or without him, but I think he adds an element of over the top and being like that makes us seem like one of those very, very, very best teams in the country again. And getting Hassan Diarra to come back for a 5th year, I'm very excited to watch this roster. I think it's super insanely talented from top to bottom, and the chances for a three-peat are definitely well within reach.
Do you think, to touch on, you mentioned Alex, and obviously everyone's excited about having him back. I feel the same way. I felt like it was win-win, for him or for us if he comes back. It's great that he's back. But I made this, since you're a football guy and this is where you do most of your content, I made it as if a football analogy where, like, if Alabama or a Georgia had a quarterback that was not necessarily an NFL quarterback, but their starting quarterback of a championship team, and he was considering going pro, but he came back, and now your starting quarterback is back. That's what I felt like with Alex Caravan. He may not be the greatest athlete of all time, but he's kind of our, like you said, our anchor. They call him the brain center, like the guy who puts everybody in the right spots. So do you agree with that? Do you think I'm a little off base there?
No, I think that's fair. You look at what Caravan did last year, and I think you could look at it as being a little disappointing or underwhelming, maybe just from an impact perspective. It was like he had periods where he was, Alex Caravan, but then he had really long stretches of cold shooting, and the team was so loaded that oftentimes it didn't matter. But this year, I think, is a really nice opportunity for him to kind of take a little more of that scoring load. Obviously, as of right now, at least I'm expecting, Liam McNeely to be one of the biggest factors in that department. But it's like after him, as far as who's going to really score the most points on this team, I think that is wide open. And I think Caravan could definitely be one of those guys because this team doesn't have Tristan Newton anymore. It doesn't have Cam Spencer anymore. So it's like, who is going to step up? And I think Caravan could easily do that and, improve his draft stock for next year, hopefully, maybe squeak into kind of the back end of the first round rather than the projected like late second that he would have been if he left this year.
For sure. Before we move on to other subjects, I'm sure you probably touch on this every once in a while. Are you watching Fox Sports, ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a 24/7 sports streaming channel, programming for you to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels that part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Before we move on to the last segment, Stars of Stores, the TBT is a big thing for UConn. Listen, there's no basketball for a while, so I'm pumped about the Stars of Stars. We got Joey Calcaterra, Ryan Boatwright, Jeff Adrian, DeAndre Daniels, RJ Cole. Those are the guys that are committed. I'm sure there's other guys that I'm missing. I heard they're trying to get Rudy Gay in. Maybe you can help with that. You seem to make things go viral. They need like 1 million views, and he'll become one of the Stars of Stores. Did you get into the TBT? Have you watched any of that? You like the Elam ending or any of that stuff?
No, definitely. I mean, I haven't followed. I shouldn't say I haven't followed it because I've been wanting UConn to have a team in this thing for so many years because every year it's like it pops up on the TV during that dead period of sports and I'm like, oh, cool, there's Syracuse's alumni team. There's Ohio State's alumni team. I'm like, we have more than enough players to qualify for something like this, like guys who, weren't quite good enough to make the NBA or stick there, but are still playing professional basketball somewhere. Like we are basically a factory for those kind of guys, or at least were for many, many years. And I'm very excited to actually watch it this year now that we have a team because I've been preaching it for so long. It's cool to. It's going to be very cool to see UConn players from so many different eras play together too, because it's such a fever dream from somebody that watched all those teams individually.
For sure. Do you have a wish list of guys who haven't been mentioned? Even like one or two guys that you wish could be on this team. You mentioned some. Like we have quite a few guys that are playing overseas that you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, they brought in a lot of guys that I had in mind. One guy that I had kind of forgot about, and I feel bad because he was like one of the guys when I was at UConn, was Rodney Purvis. So I was very excited to see him get added to the team. One of the guys I was thinking of when they first announced it, I think it was Mark D'Amelio actually asked for a player, or maybe it was a big specifically to try and recruit. And I said Sean Miller. He's another guy from my time at UConn that is kind of, under talked about. He was on one of those teams that never really did much, but he was very good. Like he was one of those bright spots of those teams. So I think, he would be a fun one. Obviously a guy like Shabazz would be a pipe dream, but I think he's almost a little like too big in the international scene. He's just always winning titles in like Spain or whatever the hell he's doing. Niels Giffey would be cool, but same thing with him over in Germany. I like the team they've got, so I'm not complaining.
Yeah, I feel like we could get Shabazz. I'll give you a good example of why we could. Shabazz is awesome, and he plays for Milan, right? Milano in Italy. And they just won a Euro. They just won a Euro Cup. And so probably the greatest power forward in Europe history, Kyle Hines, played in the TBT a couple years back. So if Kyle Hines, who is a great mid-major basketball player and also an incredible European player, can come play, Shabazz can come play for Stars of Stars. Maybe it won't be this year, but maybe we can get him in future iterations. But that would be that. You're right. I think that'd be amazing. All right, we're going to play a game when we get back from the next break called Who Do You Want?, where we ask Brandon some fun questions around what he does and some other stuff that we've been doing at Locked On UConn coming up after this. All right, Brandon, we play a game where essentially I ask you, who do you want? It's and we'll revolve it around your work, which is, do you prefer it being sketch comedy or is it content creation? Like what do you see a difference there? Or
I mean, I consider myself a content creator. I think sketch comedy is kind of a subsection of that, but I do like some other things. I'm known for the sketch comedy, but honestly, you can call me whatever you want. I'm good. I'm good with whatever.
All right. So who do you want? If you could make a sketch video or a content video with anyone in UConn history, who would it be?
Oh man, anyone in UConn history. Trying to think of like good personality kind of guys. I feel like I feel like Dan Hurley's a real easy option there just because he's the guy that's known for like the fiery personality. I mean, I'm a big wrestling fan too. He was on Monday Night Raw. He looked like a natural just in like a backstage segment there. So I think that would be good for especially my brand with how big he's gotten, but also just my enjoyment. And I think he'd get a kick out of that too. So I'll go with Dan Hurley, even though it's kind of a more recent pick, obviously.
Okay, so you picked Dan Hurley, so you can't use him for this next question. Who would be the best content creator? Who would be the funniest?
Who would be the funniest? What players have I seen personality from? So there was a commercial. I don't even remember what it was for, but it had Hurley in it. It had, I think it was like a shaving product maybe, and it had like Cam Spencer, Klingon, and they all seemed super, like pretty natural in their roles. So I'll say Klingon. Klingon seems like a real fun-loving guy. I mean, he's going to have a long basketball career, so he probably won't need to dip into the content creation world anytime soon. But
sure.
he seems like a really fun, a really confident dude. And like honestly, those are the two biggest things you need to be a content creator. You can figure out the rest later.
I think you're right on that. I think we've seen videos of him in timeouts, like singing Taylor Swift songs. He's pretty loose. I think he'd be fine.
Exactly.
All right. So my wife and I just bought a minivan to carry around our gaggle of children. If you're traveling in a minivan, you're driving, you get 4 guys or gals to come with you from the men's and women's basketball team. Who's making the road trip? You can pick 4 people. We've done this with quite a few guys.
Okay. 4 people from UConn history.
Coaches or players.
Gotcha. All right. I'm going to start with Gino and Paige because I think they have a really funny dynamic between them two. And I'd want to meet them both separately, but I'll start with both of them just to see them, probably shit talk each other for half the road trip. Gosh, what other players would I want to get in there? Kemba is kind of the guy that's just the face of UConn still. He's the one that like I watched growing up. So just for that reason alone, I'll pick him. And then one more guy. Give me Isaiah Whaley. I'll throw a wrench at you. Not to make a pun there with the wrench, but I'll throw a wrench at you there. I actually got a picture with him at the 2023 Final Four. It seemed like a really good dude. So that's my big 4 of just random combination of very good UConn players, but still weird to see them together.
I love it. I've seen Isaiah Whaley play quite a bit down here. I'm not in Connecticut anymore. I live in Greensboro, and he was with the G League Greensboro Swarm. So seen Whaley play, and right. So I don't know if he's still there. Maybe we'll see.
I have no idea.
All right. No, you're cool. You're wildly successful on social platforms. If you ever had someone threaten you for making fun of them, who in UConn history would be on your security detail?
Ooh. Who and
you could pick 2 guys. I've been using one, but considering, listen, you're famous, man. We gotta give you 2 guys. We gotta give you 2 big dudes to take it on.
Yeah. All right. So I mean, we definitely, like you said, we got to go big for sure. Man, this is gonna be a really funny name, and I hope you remember this guy. I'm gonna go with Eric Cobb for one of them. Eric Cobb played very few minutes at UConn. And again, that was the time that I was there, so that's why he sticks probably in my head a little more than maybe other people's heads. But Eric Cobb was a big boy, big bulky dude. So I'm going to go with him for one. And then another one, okay, I already used Klingon. And honestly, Klingon's almost like too gentle of a giant, I think, to pick. Same with Sonogo. Like, seems like such a nice dude. So if I'm going to pick another big dude, I'll go with Hashim Thabit. I mean, you don't get any bigger than that. I just think from anybody looking at him defending me, like they're just going to be like, actually, never mind. I'm all set. My bad.
Well, you picked a good outlier with Eric Cobb, 6'9", 250-pound former player. No one said him yet, but you are in the right realm with other folks that have been on the show. Hashim has been mentioned quite a bit. I think just his height and his stature, I think definitely gets people in an interesting way. Okay, last question. I was a professional tennis player. I have been since been roped into playing pickleball. Actually, I'm playing tonight. Who would you pick to be in UConn history your pickleball partner?
Cam Spencer. That's not even difficult. Oh my God. Like I've never even played pickleball. I mean, I've seen it played and I know kind of what it's about. From a competitiveness standpoint, there is no question. It's Cam Spencer so quickly.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many. See, I've heard this is an interesting one because we've had people say him, or they've said he'd be the last person I'd want to play with because I'd get
You
yelled
don't want
at.
him yelling at you.
Yeah, exactly. So that's been an interesting one. So there's been some contention there, but I've gotten Khalid El-Amin, which is a funny one for me. I've gotten some other good ones, but Cam has been pretty popular on the plus and the minus of that. All right, cool. Listen,
a menace.
It's been awesome having you on. I'm gonna intro us out, and then if you want, I mean, you don't need my help spreading your brand because it's very large. But go ahead before I kind of take us out. Tell people where they can find you. I know it's at Benchwarmer Brand is the YouTube channel. Am I correct? But please feel free to let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, Benchwarmer Brand on any platform that you consume short form content on: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Twitter, the Threads even. Just search Benchwarmer Brand, pick your preferred platform, and that's where I'm at. And then the only other thing would be my podcast, Brand Coverage, a mostly fantasy football podcast, which is also on my YouTube channel and on Spotify, Apple, wherever else. So that's what I got going on.
I love it. Listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you, covering 24/7 top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For Brandon Carney, I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay connected, make sure your toughness meter is always rising, and as always, go Huskies. And I messed that up. Hold on. Go Huskies. And I had some technical difficulties today.